Okay, so let's say after your experience in the service was over, did you come back to Minnesota, or what did you do?
Well, I got a master plumber's license when I was 16 years old. That was before I joined the Navy.
Really? And how did you come to...
Well, you had to have 5 years experience and you had to prove you had it. And I was able to do that. I worked for an old plumber after school. Well, I worked for a short time for a plumbing contractor in Alexandria, just after school and summers and things like that.
Right. And then you came to...
Then I went to work for an old plumber who had his own business. And he was pretty good. I learned a lot from him.
What was his name?
William Carey. And then he decided to go to California, and he sold me his business for $450. That consisted of a Model A pickup, a few lengths of pipe, a few pipe fittings, and the name and addresses of all his lake cottages that he drained down in the fall and turned on in the spring. And I didn't have $450, so we went to the bank and I borrowed it, and he co-signed the note, took the $450 and headed for California. I had that so-called business.
Really?
And those lake cottages, it didn't take me long to figure out that the right price to charge was about twice what it was worth. If you charged more than that, you were robbing them, and if you didn't charge that much, you weren't doing a good job. And most of those people were from Chicago and places like that. And these lakes were Lake Lahamadou, Lake Carlos, and all those lakes around there. But I had some great experiences. One day I had installed a new bathroom fixtures in a cottage. And I don't know, they got a hold of me about 2 in the morning. I didn't have a phone, so I don't know how they did. But the water was pouring all over the bathroom. It turned out this one couple had got a little amorous, and the lavatory wouldn't hold the two of them. So it fell on the floor and broke the water pipes, and they started shooting hot and cold water out. Well, I went over there and I shut the whole water off on the cottage and told them to be back the next day and fix it, which I did. Then there was another one. I used to pump out septic tanks on that Model A pickup. I got an old stop tank I stick on the back. But there's one guy there named... He was pretty rich. He owned a good share of Alexandria. And we had just pumped his tank out, and he had to go to Florida on some business. And his wife stayed home. And the day he got home, he called me, or got a hold of me. His septic tank was plugged up again. Well, that was only a matter of a few days. So we took the lid off, and out popped a whole bunch of condoms. He took one look at those and headed for the house, and I don't know how that came out. I suspect it wasn't good.
Oh, God. So then, I mean, you really built a business. You really built a business in that plumbing business, right? I mean, Kirckof Plumbing.
Well, I had my own business in Alexandria when I was 14.
Yeah.
I actually had 20 men working for me. Of course, most of those guys dug ditches. At that time, when you put in a water and sewer line, you didn't have a backhoe. You dug the ditch by hand.
Right.
And matter of fact, most of them, there wasn't a single one of them I would call a plumber in clutch. right after the well, I know right after the war you couldn't get plumbing supplies or anything else. So we used to buy this soil pack that was made in Mexico, and you pour lead around it, and you caulk the joint, and you'd crack them every time. It was just plain lousy cast iron. Then we'd buy these old boiler flues. Some of those were up to 20, 30 feet long. And we'd buy a closet bin, which was a 3x4. It was 3-inch diameter. We'd weld that into the boiler flue. Then we'd weld in a couple of couplings for a lavatory drain, another one for the tub drain. And we'd go up on the roof and drop that thing down. I don't know how long the boiler flues lasted, but
so you really got into some commercial contracts for plumbing. You did schools and what?
Well, in Minneapolis, out in Edina, I started Southwest Plumbing and Heating together with my brother Marshall, and we did a lot of houses and stuff. There was $200,000-$300,000 houses even at that time. And we finished up a whole development of those. And then finally we quit and we went to work for Plumbing and Heating out at we went to work at a hospital in Algona, Iowa. And then we went out to the Garrison Dam project at Riverdale, North Dakota. Then I came back. I finally came back to Minneapolis. Came to Rochester and went to work for Barry Plumbing and Heating for a while. He needed somebody with a license. Supposedly I owned 25% of it, but it was all on paper, and I knew that paper was all I'd ever get, so I left. And I started Kirckof Plumbing and Heating. My first job was the Golden Hills School. My bid was $50,000. And well, there was too much money, so they took out the whole basement. The basement had a big sewage ejector, shower rooms, and everything. And for taking out $8,000 worth of equipment, I give them $4,000 credit, and they took it. I didn't even figure anything about the labor I'd figured for it. And then there was a sewage system. There was a separate bid. That was too high, so they rejected the bids. And at that time, the plumbers weren't. If somebody had half a job, the rest of them wouldn't try to get the rest of it away from them. So they all turned in a bid higher than mine, but it was still too high. So I went out and got a separate price for the drain field, a separate price for the concrete tank. And I give them quite a bit of credit for that, but I still made a lot of money on it. And it was a separate contract, so I got paid the minute I got done. And when you're just starting in business and getting something where you make a couple $1,000s on, that's just like manna from heaven.
Right.
Then I started doing a lot of schools around. I never did a whole lot in Rochester. I did that Gage school. I did something for Jefferson, and then maybe a couple others. But it ended up most of my work was in Wisconsin. I can drive up and down that Highway 35, and I can remember doing a job in every one of those towns. I don't know what it was all the time, but I know it was one. Then first big job was the Rochester Airport. I did all the buildings out there. Then I did a big hospital in Rockford, Illinois. The architect asked me to bid it. He sent me the plans. And the local contractors had the job fixed, but they didn't know I was bidding it. Well, needless to say, I wasn't too popular in Rockford.
Uh-huh. So did you win the bid?
Huh?
Did you win the bid?
Oh yeah, I got the contract, because that was a little low. Not much either. Well, T1A Boiler was quoting the 3 big boilers for about $65,000. And they'd made a mistake. Then they sent it to Minneapolis and they sent it down to me. And in Minneapolis, they always used to take 25% off the price. Well, they didn't know that in Chicago they already took it off. So they had took it off again. Well, they furnished the boilers, but they sure went out of their way to find the cheapest burners they could find to put on them.
Yeah.
I had probably installed over 100 T1A boilers. And these are big. These were 600-pound steam pressure boilers down there. I had a high-pressure steam fitter's license, too.